A big rumors happened stating that a bunch of SNES games are coming to the Nintendo Switch.
That's right, and we have the supposed list.
Does this list look real or does it look fake?
Hot take. Cappuccino Heck, a Splatoon data miner, was sifting through the NES Online code and recently found some information that might be pointing to SNES games coming to that service.
Now, this is a big deal because a lot of people out there have wanted SNES games on the Nintendo Switch since the Nintendo Switch actually came out. Yeah. Now, this sounds, there's a lot of things to take with a grain of salt here, so salt shakers, everybody, but here's what we do know. Reggie Fils-Aimé, during an interview, had stated that we're not really going to be continuing with NES or SNES classic systems anymore. We're kind of like stopping it. And then he said, and don't expect an N64 classic anytime soon. That tells me that now would be the best time to start releasing all those classic games on the Switch to help get people buying the Switch, really.
Very much so. And I believe in that same interview, Mr. Fils-Aimé said, we're going to be concentrating on the NES Online service. So we figured that they're mostly concentrating on NES games, but there's this possibility now that they could be concentrating on releasing some SNES titles as well, which would be great because we're getting a bit of a drip feed of NES games. And it would be cool if there was another console that was being drip-fed possibly at the same time.
Yes.
And maybe we would feel a little better about our $20 a year online service.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people out there have just wanted, including ourselves, just to buy digital games outright. Just get a digital copy, get it on our Switch, not have to deal with a monthly payment or anything like that. However, I think if Nintendo is doing this the way I believe they're going to do it, they're really focusing on the idea of a Netflix-like service. So if you have people paying per month, even if they're not downloading games or whatever, they're constantly paying something. So the way it works is this. If an average user like us were to buy, let's say, one digital game a month at, let's just say, $5 a month or whatever it might be, the actual cost of how much money came, or the amount of income that came from us is reduced. Because if we were paying like $10 a month for an online service, we're actually paying a lot more. We're getting a lot more value, we're getting a lot more games, but the moment we stop paying online, all those games go right back to the servers, and we can't play them anymore.
Yeah, so Nintendo, it's in their best interest to kind of lock in a user base for whatever price a month to ensure that price is continuously paid, because most likely people will continue their service, right?
That's the idea, right? I mean, like, I have Netflix. There's a month where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to watch too much Netflix this month, and I still pay for it, right? And I think that's what they're trying to help with this, too. Now, this is Nintendo's, I want to say, first time ever really getting into paid online services. It's not. In fact, they actually predate everyone else with Satellaview and some other online services they did. Right. But we're not going to get into all that stuff,
You don't want to talk about BS Zelda today?
No, that's just prehistoric.
That's BS?
That's what it is. Look, folks, Nintendo has the experience here. They can do this stuff. I know people act like they don't. They seem to not be able to do online very well, but if this list is to be believed, there's a lot of stuff on here that makes me very excited.
Do you want me to dig into the list?
Yes.
Okay, so again, this is from Cappuccino Heck on Twitter. This was a statement. I was finally able to look around NES Online strings a bit myself and notice the sheer amount of SNES games planned. So this was within the code. Super Mario Kart, Super Soccer, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, Demon's Crest, Yoshi's Island, Stunt Race FX, Kirby's Dream Course, Poppin' Twinbee, Star Fox, Contra 3, Kirby Superstar, Super Ghouls and Ghosts, Kirby's Dream Land 3, love that game, Super Metroid, Super Mario World, Pilot Wings, F-Zero, Star Fox 2, Star Fox 2, Star Fox 2.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's a big deal.
Super Punch-Out! Legend of the Mystical Ninja, great game, great two-player game. Super Mario All-Stars, Breath of Fire 2.
Now, this is kind of an interesting list because many of those games you might actually know have been included in the SNES Classic.
13.
But if they want to get rid of them, right? If they don't want to get those systems, if they don't want those systems on the shelf, it makes a lot more sense if people that actually do still want those systems to just get a Switch. Now, the benefits of having these games on a Switch is that they're portable. Like we said, you can be online, download the games, and they'll survive on the Switch for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And then eventually you have to go back online to
your system,
your
system checks.
Yeah.
I think it's like every couple of days.
It's something like that.
Yeah.
There is a checking system in place. I think it's better to have that, to not have a checking system in place, but What do I know? I'm not that person. I guess the way that they want to go about it is it's going to be the idea that if somebody just stopped paying, they could still have these games for a really long time afterwards. I think the checking system should be longer than it is. Regardless, though, there are a lot of games here that are very important that people probably don't even... They just want in a portable form factor to play, and this is one of the first times we're actually seeing these games get released in this form factor, if it happens this way.
So if these games are being released, it actually raises a lot of questions about the current services, because we have a very NES-centric service right now, the NES Online app.
Yes.
So, okay, if SNES games are going to be released, will these be included in that app? Like, is that app going to change? Is it no longer going to be called the NES app? Is it just going to be called, like, the Classics app? And then you kind of have... different categories within that, or will we have a separate app for the SNES Classic? What do you think?
Well, I think that having the NES app as it is right now, I think it makes more sense to turn it into an overall Classics app.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Well, the Classics brand, the brand's huge, and when we think of Classics, even though Sony did release theirs, Classics is Nintendo to a lot of people right now.
I mean, they could do SNES Classic as a separate app. They could do that with N64 as well, too. However, I think making it all in one application makes a lot more sense, primarily because there are a lot of NES Classic games that they're releasing that don't make a lot of sense to people. There's some really oddball choices that they've had. There's also special edition versions of games, which, in my opinion, should have just been included day one with the original game. They should just be there. They shouldn't be their own standalone titles. Agreed. They're a waste of time. Many of them are useless. Like, they just don't play very well. I
would even have been better with them if, or happier with them if you would just click on the game. Let's say it's The Legend of Zelda, and then like two box arts would pop up. Oh, do you want the original or do you want the special version of it? That would have been fine. Yeah, I don't like seeing more icons than are necessary within that screen, and like that, I don't like seeing more icons than are necessary within like my home screen as well. So like what you're saying, I want, if there is an SNES Classic home being placed on the Switch, I do want that consolidated into the NES Online infrastructure as well, into one thing. I don't want like 3 or 4 different classics.
I agree.
And then the rest of the games that you're playing, you have to like go through all those every single time.
It's a bit much. Now, here is what makes this entire prospect so exciting to me. If you can get Super Nintendo games on the Switch, and you have this online service, you can basically do some really cool things that you hadn't done in the past with Super Nintendo games. It seems that Nintendo is very confident in the way Super Nintendo games run on their system ever since the Wii U. I think there was a bit of a question there on the Wii initially on how it would run certain games, but the Wii U, they really liked the way it ran. The SNES Classic is a great identifier because there's certain games on the SNES Classic that we didn't get at all from years past. So Yoshi's Island, right? That's a big one because that game is a Super FX 2 chip game, so it takes a little bit more to run. What's cool about this is, okay, now that you've got that, why not the Zelda BS game, right? So if you don't know, there was actually a satellite version of Zelda released on the Super Nintendo that had an audio soundtrack that would play over top of everything and have time sequences to play. That experience for many gamers out there has been lost. There's ways to play it, but it's always been hacked together by fans of the community.
It was it was archived by the community. I don't know if it was archived exactly as it could be experienced way back in the day, because that signal was just broadcast, right? And only for a specific amount of time.
Yeah. So I would like to see Nintendo kind of bring something like that back. And they can still have it timed and all that stuff, and have like specific times of the day when people can play or whatever, and like stream that audio out if they really want to keep it close to the chest.
They seem to want to experiment with their titles, because we are getting those specialized versions of their NES games and whatnot. One thing that I do want to talk about now that we're talking about like kind of things being tweaked and stuff within games, what about like when the SNES, if the SNES games are released, will they be tweaking the service as is? Because when we both have played the NES Online, the games themselves, there's not that many options there, and there's some things that we just kind of dislike, like the fact that there's a little bar of information at the bottom that doesn't disappear. Like, this is a perfect opportunity for them not only to kind of consolidate 2 systems into like a classics moniker, but they can also change, like, I want different borders. I want to be able to change resolutions and the way that, the way that the game looks in general.
Honestly, the fact that they're getting money every month to make to go forward with this stuff, Nintendo's online service has just been a weird mess. Some things work, a lot of things don't. A lot of people aren't very comfortable with it. A lot of people aren't very happy about having to pay to play their games online. But one thing I know for certain, having played this stuff, is that it feels like less effort went into this than went into the NES Classic. Okay. And that's something they need to fix. If they're going to expand this audience, if they're going to expand the library and keep people there, the experience of playing the games has to be improved.
Yes.
Think about this for Netflix. If I'm watching Netflix on one device and I switch to another, it depends on what the device is, but usually the experience is pretty consistent. Being able to search for movies is easy, or television shows, being able to set my favorites, or really, if I'm watching something on one device, it will tell the other device, or just through the the server, go, oh, you were here at that point when you're watching that TV show, so you're just going to start up right there as well. Yep. Having all those things bridged together really means a lot, and I hope that Nintendo can get to that point, because I would love the ability. I mean, unfortunately, we don't have to worry about multiple devices because Nintendo really hasn't figured out how to get people buying more than one Switch and have connected accounts, which, by the way, Nintendo, you need to do that. Like yesterday, you need to do that.
That it could very much be a thing that needs to be tackled in this new year, because there may be another iteration of the Switch coming out. So there will be multiple Switches in many homes. I'm positive.
I would love to see some filter options. Yeah. I'd love to see some basic graphics options and some changes that you can have.
So I think this is a good time to segue. You're talking about how the experience of the Classic is very much not the experience that we're getting with NES Online, which is strange because when people have dug into the coding of the NES Online service, it basically is a port of the classic console's emulator. And the Cappuccino Heck, the person who found all these games within the coding, they were also digging a little bit more with another Twitter user, Oatmeal Dome, and they found some more information. So they found not only that the NES Classic, the emulator is the one that's being used with the NES service. They found another emulator, Canoe, which is the emulator that was used in the SNES Classic. So that's a little more proof that these SNES games are coming to the Switch, because
or they're at least testing it.
Right, because the emulator is being ported over. So okay, well that's cool, and that kind of makes sense that this list is there. But there was another emulator that they found as well called Hayoko, I believe. Hayoko. We don't know what this could be for. So this could be for another console. A lot of people are saying that this could be the N64.
Could be GBA, could be Game Boy, could even be Virtual Boy.
So,
probably not that.
So, it raises the questions of, is this another console that they're possibly testing the waters for? It also raises another question. Could this be... This is weird. Could this be a backwards formulated plan where, okay, they took those classic console emulators and put them on the Switch? Could this be a classic console that starts on the Switch and later gets ported to hardware? Could this be an N64 online experience that will eventually become a tiny N64 box or a Game Boy?
You know, it would be a weird backwards way to do that. What I think they're trying to do is get more people buying the Switch. The best way to do that is to show that all the fun that you had with the NES Classic, all the fun you had with the SNES Classic, or perhaps you missed out on those, the only way to get them now is with the Switch. That's really the way they have to go about it. But there's a lot of steps they have to do to make all this stuff better. Look, having Stunt Race FX available on the console is not that big of a deal for many people out there, because they probably don't like that game, and it's not really the greatest racing game in the world.
But you can fix it. You can make it better using emulation, because the frame rate, of course, it's not all that great, right? Because, it was a Super FX chip game. It ran kind of sort of choppy and clunky, but, man, through emulation, you can get that running pretty smooth.
There's a lot of stuff you can do, and I would like to see them improve upon these things. There is this question, right? Do you retain the original control of the game and make it feel exactly like it was initially, or do you fix things and improve upon things? And there's a lot of questions that historians for video games and hardcore gamers in general have about this stuff. But personally, I believe that as long as you offer the original experience untouched and then give them something, give all the users something else to modify that experience, that's really your sweet spot. That's where you get everyone happy. And now that we know, at least it is rumored, that they have a list like this coming out, or they're working on a list like this, there's a lot of things that could be made better that they could improve upon. Because look, the NES Classic, the SNES Classic, great little devices, but they're not as powerful as the Switch, and the Switch can do so much more. So I really hope they just do more with it. I don't want them to just basically go, okay, here's the game, that's it. Work harder on it, make it better, make the entire experience better, because if you can make one game run well with certain filters and stuff like that, that goes across the board with everything else. And I think everybody wants that. I think everybody has desired that since they started the NES Classic backlog on the Switch itself.
Yeah, that's true. And we've seen that they're not scared to kind of tweak games as well. We've seen these special versions of games, but we've also seen things like they kind of dive back into the past with NES Remix. You remember those games that came out, right? So yeah, they've dabbled with stuff like that, bringing Star Fox back, and Star Fox 2 rather, and completing it. I mean, that's literally going into your backlog and completely, releasing something that wasn't supposed to be released. Putting a coat of paint on it again. Like they're used to going back and. Heck, they've released these games so many times. I mean, they have so much experience with these.
As far as I'm concerned right now, basically seeing this list, hearing all this information, I believe we're probably going to be seeing somewhere in 2019 a soft announcement or something about the SNES games coming to the Switch in some regard. Because at this point, to have that kind of information on the Switch where people like Cappuccino Heck can find it, that means that it's somewhere where they can see it. So I think we are going to see it somewhere in 2019. I believe, I don't think you're going to see it maybe in the next announcement or the next Direct or anything like that, but it definitely should be coming out sometime this year. That's just my own personal opinion on it. I am totally guessing, shooting a wild shot in the dark there for that, but yeah.
I have to ask, and we have to answer this question without knowing anything per se, except having a little bit of evidence. SNES controller that you put into the side of the Switch?
Well, I mean, if they sold enough of those NESs, right?
Yeah.
I think they're weird. I don't think they're needed. If I'm going to be going on the go anywhere and I've got the Switch in hand, I'm not going to be using those controllers, right? For me, the idea of having the Switch with the controls it has is to be able to play everything I can play right now. So you're not going to have any issues with NES, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance. You could even do Virtual Boy if you really wanted to. In terms of controls, there's enough buttons there that you could do it. Yeah, it's got them.
Okay.
There are things.
Okay.
You could also do a Nintendo 64. You've got enough buttons there. But the more you get into GameCube, that's when you start to have issues because GameCube has analog triggers where the Switch doesn't. When you get into the Wii, there are certain things that you have to worry about with that, and it gets a little bit crazy. Right?
I think the Wii is more of a possibility than the GameCube. One thing's for sure. I don't believe that whatever this Hayoko emulator is that they found on there that we're kind of assuming is the N64, I don't believe that this is pointing towards, like, some people are saying that it could be a GameCube emulator.
I just don't see that.
Yeah, and I don't believe, I believe the logical next step would be N64, and I believe that if they are going to be incorporating those games onto their service, it's going to be like a la carte. Because they'll sell you a GameCube game for $20 or maybe even $30, depending on what it is, right?
Yeah,
instead of it being just like an open sort of Netflix service.
I would even, like, in my opinion, if they were to go back to the GameCube library of games, I think they would be very specific about what games they want to take, because maybe they want to remaster some of those old ones. Remember, Wind Waker wasn't so long ago that they released it on the Wii U in a high-definition version. Maybe that game, the Wii U version gets released again. You know what I mean? Like, those things could possibly happen, but it's definitely not right now in their best interest to re-release GameCube games, because there's a lot of work that goes into that. It's a little bit more complex than I think people give it any credit for, and even though the fan community has been capable of editing or emulating GameCube games fairly easy, when it comes to doing it on the Switch, it's a different ballpark, it's a different experience. And yeah, I just think that the games that they want from that system, they're more likely to port over. And maybe that happens right now, maybe it doesn't. But folks, what are you excited about when it comes to the Switch?
Yeah.
Do you want all these SNES games on your console?
Yeah, or what's missing from the list? Is this the list that they should be leading with? Because this is possibly the games you might be getting in a year or so.
And how many people out there actually want Stunt Race FX? I'm just curious, because like I like it, but
I'd play it.
Not everybody else really does.